think we got a gem of a player. She is 6'7". She is 6'7". Athletic, and I mean, but she's 18 years old. And she's definitely gonna have to get in the weight room to see Molly. But excited.
Welcome onto the sideline, everybody. I'm Sports Director Matt Dowell, back in our studio after the holidays. New Year's is still to go, but our Christmas holiday is over, and I'm joined today by Michael Sauls of the State Newspaper, who's kind of coming off the bench for us today because I'm back in the office for the first time today. Jared is on vacation. He's taking his holiday vacation this week, and then Claire's been dealing with the flu. So our sports department's a little everywhere. So I texted Sauls, and I was like, hey, man, you want to jump on the pod with me today? And he was like, heck yeah, I'll be there in like a couple hours. So, Sauls, thank you for joining us, and welcome back to the podcast. Your second time and first time, though, here in the studio.
Yes, thank you, everyone, for having me back. It was a pleasure to pinch hit today.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. I really, really appreciate it. And how was your holiday break?
It was good.
You worked yesterday. So.
Yeah. I worked yesterday, but that's part of the job. But yeah, no, it was good. Spent lots of time with the family here in Columbia, and I miss it, but it's good to be back at work.
Yeah, and just so people can know, you obviously write for the State Newspaper. We've had you on, but you are a Columbia guy.
Yes.
AC Flora grad.
Yes. Born and raised in Columbia, went to AC Flora, came back here to work for the State Newspaper in January of this year, almost a full year being back in Columbia. But yeah, born and raised in Columbia, and yeah.
Having a good time, and his work is so good. So you guys check out Michael Sauls' pieces at the State Newspaper, features, game recaps, all that kind of stuff. He does it all. Today's episode is dedicated to Gamecock basketball because the non-con is over for the women. The guys have one more game tomorrow, which is Tuesday. We're filming this on a Monday, but SEC play is pretty much ready to go. So this whole episode is going to be dedicated to previewing the SEC for both South Carolina women's and men's basketball. But Sauls, we're going to start with the women because they are number 3 in the country. They are the headliner for us here in Columbia, and they have had a very successful non-con and now getting ready for what is going to be a gauntlet of an SEC schedule because once again, it is such a good, talented conference, but I think this year's SEC looks to be better than last year's. I think everyone has gotten better. I think the conference is very deep, and I think it's going to be one of those, like we've seen a lot where every single week is going to present challenges for the Gamecocks. But before we start previewing the SEC play, it was a very eventful holiday break for South Carolina women's basketball because, Sauls, they are getting a much welcomed addition to the team and what's been a season plagued by injury and illness, as 18-year-old Alicia Tournebize from France will be joining the Gamecocks for this spring semester, and she will be eligible to play during this conference play. So this is a huge get for Dawn Staley in South Carolina. She was at the CLA during the non-con checking the team out. She plays some pro ball over in France, but again, she's basically a freshman, for South Carolina. 6'7". Originally the reports were that she is 6'4", but she's actually 6'7", so she's bringing height to South Carolina. All that being said, from what we hear from those reporters over in France, is she's an elite talent, and Dawn Staley and everyone who kind of is in this circle seems to be very high on this French prospect.
I just know that the first dunk she has in Colonial Life, the roof is going to blow off of that building,
and she double hands it.
Yes, it's a double hand. It is as true as a dunk as you can get. But no, obviously it's a major get in the terms of this team needs depth so badly. Yes, it was one of those things when you came into the year after Chloe Kiss got hurt is, how's the bench production going to be? They led the nation in bench points or whatever. It was one of those things where it wasn't necessarily a realistic expectation to kind of replicate that production off the bench, but it would be nice to have more than what they're getting off the bench, let's be honest. So I think having Tournebize is massive. One, because she's playing pro ball like that. Yes, she was only playing, I think it was 8 minutes a game or something like that, pro ball, but that's more pro ball than anyone on the
with grown women.
Yeah, with grown women, more pro ball than anyone on the South Carolina roster has played in their career, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be big, but also just to be able to give Joyce Edwards and Medina Akot some some extra relief off of the bench will be massive. And, if it comes with a dunk here or there, then I think everybody will be happy.
Yeah, especially having depth in the post is huge, because when Chloe and Ashlyn, out for the season, that is really the area that struggled the most. They have pretty good depth with the guard position, but it was really in the post play. So even if she plays 3-4 minutes a game, that's huge, just to kind of give Joyce, Medina, like you said, Miriam, all these players rest. And I'm wondering if she starts to click, will she be one of the first off the bench? Once she starts to get comfortable in the system, at the time of this recording, she's not here yet. There's a lot of documentation, paperwork that they still have to get worked out. It's been the holidays, so offices are closed, etc. So once she gets here, we're excited to see how Tournebize kind of fits into this Gamecock system. But it's some much welcomed height on another roster spot, and they're up to 11, which is huge for Dawn Staley and the Gamecocks. And speaking of Alicia Tournebize, Dawn Staley, after their win against Providence on Sunday, kind of gave us a preview of what to expect from Tournebize and really the situation of what all goes into kind of getting her here in Columbia.
Just super excited. I think we got a gem of a player. She is 6'7". She is 6'7". Athletic, but she's 18 years old. And she's definitely gonna have to get in the weight room to see Molly. But excited. We don't know when she's gonna get here. I think she's, at the. She has appointments, documentation that she needs in order for her to, get here. But hopefully before school starts.
So I think everyone kind of waiting, excited to see when Tournebize lands here in Columbia to begin her tenure with the Gamecocks. Excited to see all the talent that she's bringing to Columbia in just a few days. Now let's preview the SEC for South Carolina women's basketball. Again, Michael, Sauls, it has been a year full of injury and illness. Against Providence, everyone was back. I got McKeer back from that concussion protocol. All 10 Gamecocks were there, and I felt like with the Tournebize news, with everyone healthy, it felt like, okay, the turning point for the season is here. Everything's going to start to really click and go, go, go. And it felt like the positivity, all that kind of bad juju was in the past for the Gamecocks.
Gone.
And then in the second quarter, T'Nia Latson goes down with an ankle injury. And at the time of this podcast recording, we don't know the extent of the injury. We don't know how long she's going to be out, if she's going to be out at all. But it did take the air out of the arena. And it kind of was like, how is this happening again to another player? I've covered this team for 10 years. I have never seen a South Carolina team deal with so many injuries across the board like they have done this year. But, if Latson is out for even a few games, it does change how things look, because she's a huge piece to this Gamecock puzzle.
It was one of those things where the second that she went down, you could almost hear a pin drop in that crowd. And that was a pretty good crowd for the first home game after Christmas. Like, it was one of those, yes, South Carolina draws a big crowd every home game, but that was like a noticeably like, oh, you came in, maybe thought it was going to be a little bit less, but it was crazy how quiet it got in that building when she went down. But obviously, I think if she misses, whether it's one game or extended time, you're going to need a lot more out of your bench guards and Isla McDowell and Agat McKeer and Maddie McDaniel. And I think the way that McKeer played against Providence after missing a month in concussion protocol was very much like, okay, I think we'll be good. Like it was very much a all right, that's fine, because she had a double-double almost exclusively in the second half. I think it was all of her 10 points in the second half. 9 of her 10 rebounds came in the second half. So I think that was a very good sign. Obviously, we don't know how long, like you said, she'll be out, if at all. But I think you've seen enough from Raven Johnson, from Tessa Johnson to go, okay, the starters will probably be fine in terms of scoring and kind of the void that T'Nia could possibly leave, given that she's averaging 17 points a game. But I think, and even someone like Isla McDowell, who was number one off the bench against Providence, has shown strides in her ability to, even when maybe Isla isn't scoring 8-10 a game, she's able to kind of stuff the stat sheet in other spots. So I think it's something that you don't want T'Nia Latson, who was leading the country in points last year. You don't want her to miss time, but if you do, I guess you would kind of want it to be at that guard spot missing, because your depth whether, Tournebize is here or not, is a little bit more solidified at the guard spot.
Agreed, and I do think when you look at the beginning of this SEC schedule, it's pretty kind for the first couple of weeks for South Carolina. They do open against Alabama on New Year's Day. Bama undefeated, but the schedule not been very hard for the Crimson Tide, so I don't really know how much you take away from their play right now because they are in a very much a transition period with Sarah Ashley Barker going to the WNBA and all of those things. So I'm interested going into Thursday's opener to see what Alabama looks like because I think it's been hard to kind of tell just how good they are. Undefeated season, impressive, but not all undefeated seasons, I think, are the same for everybody. So we'll see what Bama brings to the table. But then you got Florida, you got Arkansas. So I think this is a good time if Latson's out for a little bit. It's a good part of the schedule because a couple weeks, Texas comes to town, and you got to think that's the one where they're really going to want her to be 100% and ready to go. But as we look at the SEC for South Carolina, you kind of have the same teams that are going to probably be vying for that top spot. Texas, South Carolina, LSU, Tennessee, who's struggled a little bit in the non-con, but it seems to be the same contenders right now, at least. We'll see if anyone tries to spoil the party. I think Kentucky's a sleeper going into this conference play, but I think the conversation right now, Sauls, is Texas and South Carolina. And I think going into it, Texas is going to be considered the favorite to win the conference, but I don't think it's an overwhelming favorite to maybe the way people think it is with how good Texas has looked, and they have looked really good so far. But you got to remember, they only beat South Carolina on a buzzer beater. It was a great game. South Carolina had tons of chances to win that game. So if South Carolina makes their free throws at the end, we could be having a very different conversation now. But it does seem like it's those two, once again, fighting for the top spot. Put LSU, put Tennessee right behind them, I think. But I think it's going to be a very competitive conference once again.
I agree. It's one of those things we sit here and go, oh, the SEC is deeper than last year, which is like a crazy thing to think that at one point maybe the SEC wasn't phenomenal top to bottom. But, I mean, this year, like you said, I would put South Carolina and Texas in kind of that top tier. And then LSU arguably can be up there with them. I think Texas and South Carolina have proven more in the non-conference slate than LSU has. I think most people would agree with that. But then even like an Oklahoma or like
I didn't even talk about
or an Ole Miss or a Kentucky, like to your point, like this league is extremely deep this year. But I do think we'll probably get South Carolina versus Texas round. That would be round 3 if they made it to the SEC title because they already played once. They'll play again in February. So I feel like that's probably the safe bet, but it's a safe bet for a reason. I mean, 2 phenomenal teams. It was a 1-possession game. I would not be surprised if it came down to those 2, but also, I mean, I think you got a team like Vanderbilt who is good and could make some noise. Tennessee, like you said, Ole Miss, Oklahoma. Like this league is crazy, but I do agree that the beginning of the SEC slate for South Carolina is kind of favorable, I guess would be the word, in the sense of, yes, Alabama's good, but you're opening it at home, and you might have Tournebize for that game. Like, that should be a game South Carolina wins, and then Arkansas is in year 1 with a new coach. Probably going to win that game.
Frankly, just not a very good team.
Yeah. And then, Florida, yes, you're on the road, but Florida hasn't been too great outside of, like, 1 or 2 players this year.
Yeah.
So I agree. You never want to like have a stretch of time where you're playing without a player, but like if there was a time to lose Taniya Latson possibly for more than one game, now would be the time before you get into the thick of SEC play.
Absolutely. And I think, when you look at everything, I know people like to talk about LSU and their non-con, but they will be in the mix. And I think it's stupid to say that, this Kim Mulkey team is not going to challenge everybody. Like, their non-con has not been good, and that's a whole other conversation. But they start off with, I think, 4 top 12 teams in their first 5 games. So they're kind of the opposite. They have a big challenging SEC schedule. So we'll see LSU be tested right away. They open up against Kentucky, which I can't wait for that game. But if you think that LSU is not going to be in the mix once again, you're just lying to yourself. They have so much talent. By the time March comes around, they will be very, very good. Oklahoma is going to be good. They keep getting better with their team as they start to click. Kentucky has a lot of new pieces. They're really good. So I'm excited to see these showdowns, not just with South Carolina, but with everybody in this conference. But when it comes to South Carolina, Sauls, what are the things that have really impressed you in this non-con slate? And what are the things that you're kind of saying, okay, this could be a question mark for the Gamecocks?
Yeah, I think obviously, Dawn Staley has built this program on, success in the paint. And I think they just continued to have so much of that. The paint point differential is my favorite stat to go look at every game. It's just there's just this astronomical divide between teams and when they play in these paint points stats. I think the big question mark will obviously be bench production in the sense of what are you getting from those 5-6 players coming off the bench. You're going to need a little bit more. I think. Like I said earlier, the replicating that bench points production from last year was not going to happen. I mean, one of your top bench scorers goes to a whole other school, 2 of them are in the starting lineup. It wasn't going to happen. But the fact of the matter is, you do need a little bit more because that has been one of Dawn Staley and South Carolina's key things in these past years is just how crazy the depth is and how little of a drop off there is when she takes the starting 5 out.
Yeah,
and you don't want a massive drop-off when you get into that game with LSU at Baton Rouge, in February. You don't want to have a major drop-off when you take your starting 5, when you're on the road at Oklahoma, stuff like that. So I think that's probably the biggest question mark, but we'll see how the bench continues to develop throughout the season, but also just how big of an impact Tournebize is.
Absolutely. And I think when you look at December especially, I felt like there was a notable increase in level from South Carolina compared to November. Even when you think about the Texas game in Vegas, I think even from then until now, I think South Carolina is considerably better. I think the chemistry is a lot better than it was because I think that was a lot of the issues in November was just new pieces trying to figure out how to play together.
Yeah.
But I think this team is really starting to click chemistry-wise, and I think really the past 2 weeks, I would say the level for me has been noticeably better from South Carolina, just quality-wise. I also think players like Tessa Johnson are going to be a huge kind of game changer for South Carolina. If she keeps hitting threes the way she was hitting them against Providence, she stretches the floor, and she gives South Carolina a huge three-point threat from beyond the arc. I think the bigger question mark for me is just continues to be maybe defense and rebounding, because those are, to me, the cornerstone of South Carolina women's basketball. The rebounding, can Joyce continue to find a way to get rebounds? Can the defense just continue to click as they continue to build chemistry? So those are the things I'm looking for South Carolina, because I think sometimes we saw some miscommunication throughout the non-con, just again, as they continue to learn to play together. So will the defense continue to get better? Will the rebounding continue to get better, which I think, again, are cornerstones for South Carolina. Anything else, Sauls, that you want to add about the women's team as we get ready for conference play? Again, they open up against Alabama on New Year's Day.
You bringing up Tessa made me think of she is shooting the lights out of the ball right now. I mean, I think it's career high marks in points per game, a field goal percentage, true shooting percentage, and 3-point percentage. I tweet it every single time. Anytime she hits a corner 3, it's death taxes and Tessa Johnson from the corner. She is phenomenal from the corner, and she's phenomenal from 3. And it was so fun to watch her against Providence, where, I asked her after the game, and she gave me the political answer in the sense of, Tanaya goes down. Joyce had a not good first half scoring-wise, and then Tessa scores 18. And I was like, was there an added emphasis on you to score, or was it just the flow of the offense? And she said it was the flow of the offense, but watching her go out and, seamlessly, I guess is the word I'm looking for, seamlessly find points is just so fun to watch, and she's done a really good job of that this year. She doesn't force anything, and when she doesn't force anything, and yet is still, averaging career highs across the board on offense. So she's been phenomenal to watch this year, and I think she'll continue to play a crucial part as the season goes on, especially if Tanaya Latson misses a game or 2.
Absolutely, and I think the last thing I want to say about South Carolina women's basketball is Raven is the veteran, and I think sometimes we don't talk about her as much because she's just been on the team for so long. But she offensively has gotten so much better this season. She always had the defense. She always had the passing. She always had the steals. But the big criticism for Raven Johnson was always, can she score? Why can't she score? Blah, blah, blah. This year, y'all, Raven is scoring, and she's scoring a lot more than she has in the past. Sauls, she looks so comfortable shooting the ball. She just looks like she's in a groove. It just looks like a different Raven offensively this year. And she adds, if she can add this scoring compared to the defense and the steals and the passing, it adds a whole other dimension for South Carolina and another just option for them offensively that maybe she wasn't providing in the past.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, she's it's bounds and leaps, I guess is the best way to put it offensively. Like she'll pull up from 3 and I'm not worried. I'll go, okay, there's a solid chance that's going in. And I like you said, she had the playmaking, she had the defensive ability, just the fact that she's been able to kind of put it all together this year. I mean, she's helping her draft stock out. That's for sure. And South Carolina likes that because 1, it gets another player in the pro, but 2, more wins come while she's here. So yeah, Raven's been phenomenal this year.
I've been on the Raven bandwagon for years now, even with the offensive struggles in the past. I just think she is so good at everything on the floor, and this year watching her score, I think that she is so underrated and so underappreciated on a national scale because she is so smart, and the way she sees the floor is just kind of, I think, unlike maybe anyone in the women's game. And I just think she makes it look so easy that people don't, really recognize what she's doing. And I know there's a lot of Raven fans out there, so you guys know what I'm talking about. Sauls, anything else before we move on to the guys?
One last thing on Raven. She's a great quote.
Yes, she is.
she makes our jobs a lot easier.
She does. Yeah, we love Raven for that since she's a good soundbite. Again, South Carolina opens up against Alabama for their SEC play on New Year's Day at 2 o'clock at the CLA. So it should be fun to watch SEC play get underway for the women. Now let's kind of talk about the other end of the scale, and that is the men's team, which not the confidence, Sauls, that we have in the women going into SEC play. And I'm going to be honest, I went into this season for the guys with all of these new players, all of these new faces saying, okay, I didn't want to really make any hot takes or predictions. I didn't really want to give an opinion on anything because I didn't know what they would look like. I didn't know the players. I hadn't seen them play together as a team. So I said, let's just watch and see. Let's see what this Lamont Paris team is about. And I got to say, I'm just going to keep it real. I have not been super impressed in the non-con so far. The losses, there's been a lot of issues. I don't think this team has hardly any post play, which I think is going to be a huge issue going into SEC play. We know how good the SEC has gotten in these past few years in men's basketball. And also, Sauls, I know you wanted to touch on this. They really are relying on the three-point shot, but the problem is they're not shooting the 3 very well. And so I don't have a lot of confidence going into SEC play right now, and they do have one more non-con game on Tuesday night before they begin SEC play, but I don't know. There's a lot of concern for this South Carolina team going into SEC play in my eyes.
Yeah, I think to your point, I mean, from an offensive standpoint, I think the expectation was we're going to shoot the lights out of the ball. We have the capability to do that, and that just hasn't been the result so far. And granted, teams can get out of shooting slumps. It's not to say that they'll never be able to shoot well ever again this season, but I do think, from an expectation standpoint on offense, they expected more, and they just haven't had that. And that's just kind of how it's been. And, you kind of hope that they find that stride of this last non-con game because, I mean, the SEC is a gauntlet in men's basketball. Yeah. And if you can't score, yes, you're not going to win games. But, like, if you can't do it consistently and can't shoot better, you're not going to find any rhythm on offense at all.
And the eye test, I think, is a real thing because, you can say, they lost to Butler. They lost to, some of their better non-con opponents, Virginia Tech, et cetera, Clemson. But the losses, some of them they lost in last-minute situations that were concerning. Others were not very close. But then even they didn't have a very hard non-con. Let's just keep it real. And I think in those games where they were expected to win comfortably, especially against, in-state opponents, they didn't look very good in those wins. So I think that's more of where my concern lies is the level. I don't think it hasn't been consistent, first of all, but I just don't think the level has been very high through this part of the season, which when you go into SEC play, I mean, it's just going to be, hit after hit after hit after hit. Yeah. And so I don't have a lot of confidence. And then you start to think, okay, what does the future of this team look like and all of that? And I know that is a couple of months away before that conversation happens. But I do think that there's a lot of concern for this team. And even the way Lamont kind of talks about it in press doesn't give me a lot of confidence. He's saying he expected them to be further along, at this point. He says, I don't know why we're not shooting better. I don't know. I don't have a lot of expectations for this team. I think maybe my expectations start low, and if they surprise me, that's great, rather than expecting them to beat these teams and then be disappointed. But I'm not expecting a lot from this team, quite frankly, going into conference play.
And I think that's fair. I think just the way to like fully wrap up and kind of explain, I guess, this team this year is, they're not playing consistently, but in the few times when they are, it's not to a super high level where they expect to be at or where you want to be at. And that level is not where not where they need to be. Like, that level is not going to win you a lot of games in the SEC, and I feel like that's just kind of the gist of this season so far.
And we'll see. Again, maybe they'll hit their stride, and maybe they will surprise all of us. And, more power to them. I hope that happens. But for now, I think expectations, just based on the way they played these first couple of months, I think you got to start low and then just see if they can surprise us. But again, I think it's kind of what we've seen the past few years of going into conference play, expectations sky high for the women and kind of low for the guys. But we'll see how it all plays out. Again, the guys have one more non-con game this Tuesday, and depending on when you guys listen to this, that game might be over or not. But Sauls, anything else you want to add about either Gamecock basketball team before we wrap up?
I think that just about sums it up. The expectations for the women are sky high, and they're meeting them, and the men's expectations are kind of lower, and they're having a little bit of trouble meeting them.
Yeah, we'll see how it all plays out. Again, it gets underway Thursday for the women. That'll be our first game in SEC play this year, and then it's just get on board the train, y'all, because then it just speeds up as March and early April approach. He's Michael Sauls. Sauls, I know you've been on our podcast before, but for those who maybe didn't get to listen to that one or watch it, how can they follow you and read your stuff?
At MC Sauls on Twitter. I, again, write for the state newspaper, so thestate.com, gogamecocks.com is our South Carolina specific content. Instagram is by.mcsauls. So yeah, read the state newspaper and support local journalism in Columbia.
Absolutely. He does such great work, everybody. He has so many good pieces, so many good features, game recaps, all of that. Make sure you give it a read on your phones, on your computers, wherever you guys, take in your digital content.
Exactly.
As always, give us your thoughts on SEC play for both South Carolina women and men's basketball. Give us your pros, your cons, your thoughts, your concerns, what you like, what you don't like. I love reading the comments. I'm a comment watcher, so I like to scroll and read what you guys are saying. You guys know your stuff, so chime in and let us know. And if you have any questions for us, give us those throughout the season. I do want to say too, before we wrap up, that our next interview here on our podcast will be out on New Year's Day, New Year's morning. I'm going to be joined by Destiny Littleton, the former Gamecock women's basketball player who's now playing overseas. We're going to talk about her life. She has such a fascinating story, her Gamecock memories, and what she's doing now in the pros overseas. So Destiny Littleton will be our first official guest of 2026 going in to the new year. As always, make sure you guys like, subscribe, comment, and follow wherever you guys watch or listen to us on YouTube or wherever you follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon Music. Thanks for joining us on this pod. I was off for 11 days, so getting back in the flow. Hope it all made sense. Hope you enjoyed the show. Sauls, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you very much.
All right, he's Sauls. I'm Dowell. We'll see you next time here on South Carolina Sideline.